Welcome to Frickety Frack. We do talk back. Thank you for joining us on our fourth episode of this season.
Hello, my name is Jeff, and I'm Frick.
Hello, my name is Patrick, and I'm Frack. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show airing once a week where we will discuss different aspects of fandom and how they relate to the gospel. For this season of the podcast, we are concluding our discussion of the miniseries Kingdom Come and how we see lessons from the issues that connect to teachings in the Bible. Just as many of you are, we are also fans of other things as well. So after this, once we complete this discussion, we will announce what we are going to go to next at the end of the episode. So you have to make it all the way to the end of the episode to find out what we're going to do. And so, but it could be anything ranging from anime, comics, video games, movies, or other things that anything that we are fans of. And we got the name of the show from our father, who dubbed us Frickin' Frack since we were kids.
And like Patrick was saying, this is the final issue of the Kingdom Come miniseries. This fourth issue is entitled The Never Ending Battle. The Gulag has been attacked, and the imprisoned metahumans and Justice League are now in full-fledged combat. While Superman is trying to get Captain Marvel to snap out of his brainwashing, the Spectre alerts Norman McCray that the hour of judgment nears and that he must be ready to pronounce who is at fault. We see at the UN, it is discovered that they intend to drop nuclear bombs on the metahumans because humanity can no longer survive in this world, and fear that the war between the metahuman factions will spread and wipe everybody out. Neither the imprisoned metahumans nor the Justice League are gaining any ground, and in order to tip the scale, something's got to happen. Just so happens that's when Batman and his forces arrive. Batman's forces arrive in order to preserve life and attempt to maintain some form of control. However, it's too late, as Wonder Woman takes the first life of one of the imprisoned metahumans, Von Bach. Wonder Woman and Batman then take their battle to the sky, where they see the approaching jets with the nuclear bombs. They call a momentary truce and take the fight to the bombers. They manage to take out two of the bombs, but the third is unfortunately launched. While this is happening, Superman and Captain Marvel continue their fight, with Marvel seeming to have the upper hand with the lightning strikes that come down when he calls out the name Shazam, causing massive damage to the Kryptonian. However, during a well-timed lightning strike, Superman manages to have the strike hit Marvel as well, causing Captain Marvel to revert to his Billy Batson form. Superman appeals to Billy, saying only he can make the decision as to what happens next, since Billy happens to know what it is to be both man and God. Superman practically saying that basically he falls under the God category since he's a Kryptonian. Same thing with Wonder Woman, and then Batman would fall under he is just a man. He doesn't understand what it is to be a metahuman. However, Billy understands both. Superman releases Billy and flies to stop the bomb, but Billy transforms once more into Captain Marvel. As he flies up, he grabs Superman by the foot and throws him to the ground. Captain Marvel does manage to destroy the bomb. However, he dies in the process. With the massive nuclear explosion, Superman does survive. However, he sees nothing but skeletal remains surrounding him. Superman believes that he's the only one that survived and flies off to the UN. And while in full-on berserker mode, Norman appears before Superman, letting him know that some heroes did survive and that he's not the only one left. He also gives Superman counsel, and that where Superman really messed up was that when he started to emphasize the super over the man. Humans and metahumans form a sort of peace treaty to work in harmony the way they should have from the get-go. Batman turns his stately manor into a hospital to rehabilitate those who participated in the wars. Diana winds up being accepted back to the Amazons, and Clark takes on the role of farmer, trying to rectify the issues from the nuclear attacks. We then jump forward 1 year later. Clark, Diana, and Bruce reunite at the Planet Krypton restaurant. Diana intends to surprise Bruce with the announcement that she is pregnant with Clark's child, but Bruce announces it first. Diana still does manage to surprise both men by announcing she wants Bruce to be their child's godfather to help keep their child grounded. And that is the end of Kingdom Come.
And so there's a lot of interesting things that happened in this issue, and one of the things that stood out to me is the relationship of Wonder Woman and Batman. Wonder Woman is, as we've shared in the other issues of this series, Wonder Woman is the driving force for wholesale war, and Batman is fully against it. And when they are having their disagreement in the amidst the battlefield, Diana calls him "you aristocratic B word." I'm not going to say it because I want to keep the clean status for our podcast. And so it's "you aristocratic B word," and calls him. He's like, "How dare you talk down to me?" And one of the other things she says is that you decide to crawl out of your cave and just think everyone should bow to your wisdom. And one of the things that's interesting about Bruce is that something that he actually does have in common with the metahumans, not of powers, but of not understanding what the common man goes through. I mean, he's the wealthiest person on the planet. Well, depending if you ask him or Lex Luthor, who the richest guy is. And then, so he's never wanted for anything. He worked really hard to get to where he is as Batman, but he also had the funding of the Wayne Fortune to always fall back on. And so he doesn't necessarily understand what normal people go through all that much either, to a certain extent.
Right.
But he has his grounding moments. And so that's one of those things that it's something to kind of think about, how Batman just kind of expects everyone. And that's the other thing that I love that Diana called him on with this, was that, Batman hid in a cave too. It wasn't like he was actually interacting with anyone all that much either.
Right.
So
yeah. And see, and that's one of the things that I really like about this, because it'd be very easy in this scenario, like what's going on, that they could easily paint Diana as the one that's clearly in the wrong. Now, granted, with the way that this series is, the idea of taking another one's life, murdering somebody, even if it is in a warlike fashion with battles, and so some would say it's not murder, but that's not something we're here to debate today. But Diana took a life, and that is something that's very against what both Superman and Batman have shown to stand for. And it'd be very easy to just solely paint her as the one in the wrong here. However, I do think that they still hold her mostly wrong, that she's mostly in the wrong. But her comments back to Bruce are very poignant, and in all honesty, it's part of the issue with something that goes on in society today. So I think it's really important, because Bruce doesn't know what it's like to, just like like you're saying, Patrick, Bruce doesn't understand what it's like to be a normal human being. Dudes have, he's had money his whole life. He's never had to be like, oh man, I don't know how I'm going to make rent. I don't know if I'm going to be able to feed my family. He's never gone through that. Because he's always been able, and when he did make the decision that he's going to become Batman, or will become a hero, he knew he could do it because he had the money to be able to make it happen. And obviously, it's not just that. His will is almost like you could argue that there's only maybe a handful of people that have a stronger willpower than he does to make it actually happen, that make him become a hero. But he doesn't know what it is to be human, to be a normal person. And so Diana has some points here saying, it's like, you've been hidden in the cave and you just expect everybody to listen to you and that you're the one in the right. but I mean, because I think it's safe to say that we've run into the same problem with our politicians. Think about like, so how many of our politicians now just don't know what it's like to actually be a normal, regular human being anymore, because they've been, like, especially with some of these, you know, congressmen that have been, congressmen, senators that have been uh, there for literally decades. Like, they've been in the White House, like, they've been in Congress longer than I've been alive. And it's just like, you don't know what it's like to be normal. And so I just think that it's it's not necessarily what it's trying to hit here, but it does. It hits here the fact that there's these people out there that expect us to bow to them and do everything that they say when they don't even know what it's like to be us anymore.
And so in the Batman and Wonder Woman fight, continuing with they're conversing, they're fighting, they're throwing all these accusations back at each other. They Wonder Woman forces Batman um, above the clouds and into this bright blue sky. Is really this artwork that Alex Ross provides in this is just fascinating, because you wouldn't have guessed that in this war zone is actually, in fact, a bright blue sky. It's because the color, the destruction of the gulag, the battle that's going on. It's not normal, tint and sky. It's like, destruction and death and that kind of thing. But above it is this clear blue sky, and I love that when they do that, it clears their head. The symbolism of that is just amazing. And so then that's when they see the three nuclear bombs, I guess, because they drop it, so it's a bomb, are coming that way, and they take it out. And so that's one of those things that is just great, great artwork, great direction by Mark Wade. I'm assuming Mark did that. I don't know. It's always tough to tell how much the writer does or the artist has say and that kind of thing. So it's just one of those really fascinating things that happens in this battle.
One of the things too in this battle that I uh, really dug is when Batman and his forces show up, because it's intentionally harkening back to when the Justice League first, the artwork when the Justice League first appears, and in the earlier in the series when they're just descending from the sky, but this time it's Batman and his forces, and I just love it. Absolutely 100% love the callback in their own miniseries. They're doing callbacks, and it's just absolutely beautiful artwork. Again, just like Patrick's saying, like we could spend hours just talking about the little artistic things that happen in all of these issues. Even remove the story. We can just talk about the artwork and just how beautiful and gorgeous it is. And I especially love the times when he definitely makes Superman look like Christopher Reeves in some of these panels, especially when Superman is trying to appeal to Captain Marvel in those fights. Like, I just see Christopher Reeve throughout all of this, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. And another one of the little things this kind of tickled me a little bit, in that when after the war is over and Bruce has become a doctor, much like his father was, or well, maybe not just like his father, but similar to his father. It refers to his place as a once stately manor, and again, like we've said, I've read this so many times, and I don't know if it's just because it has been a while since I've read it that I forgot about it or I didn't catch it before. But I absolutely love that he called it stately manor, because if you go back and watch the Adam West Batman shows, every single episode, the narrator always calls Bruce's home stately Wayne Manor. And so I just love those little things in it. And so that's just something here that is really stuck out to me. And um, is there, but and before we start tackling some of the thematic issues, Patrick, is there anything else just kind of like you want to talk about before we get into
No,
some of the themes?
no, because I mean, we could do Easter egg hunts in the backgrounds of these issues for days on end, and we probably still
Mhm.
wouldn't find them all. So I guess for me, the one of the themes that I wanted to talk about before we even get to the biblical themes is the heroes demasking after Superman calms down, like when they arrive at the UN. I
Mhm.
love the play on that, where like you see Green Lantern take his mask off. He's standing there next to Jade, and he's taking his mask off. He's like, you know what? Let's get rid of this. Let's not be that. Like, I mean, no, Superman doesn't have a mask, but Wonder Woman took her helmet off. Batman took his off.
Mhm.
Um, like, okay, let's do this together, and that's always been one of the most important things that in any way of living is in community and in partnership with one another. And so the demasking of that, the realizing the mistake, like and I know this is probably, I know this is, I'm assuming this is probably part of the symbolism, but the Flash, you see him in the background, he doesn't have his little helmet thingy on.
Mhm.
um and so I think
The
that's the
Mercury
best.
helmet, yeah.
Yeah, the Mercury helmet. So it's gone. It probably got knocked off in the fight. But I kind of thought of it in a way that that was his way of being unmasked. But now here's uh, being a backseat artist. He should have been still. Like, I mean, he was still in two places at once. Um, but that's just my opinion. Like, to really show that is like, okay, Flash is getting back to being human. One place, one moment. Like, you could still be red and lightning or whatever if you wanted, but stop being in two places. But that's just my opinion. Um, I mean, I'm not going to tell Alex Ross how to draw something. Um, I guess I kind of did, but I'm also not going to critique him. Well, I guess I did. Anyways, I'm going to stop talking now. Your turn.
So, so ultimately, what is kind of fascinating through this is, and especially in this last issue, it really, in like this entire miniseries, it's been basically, you know, the idea has been metahumans versus metahumans, and then humans are caught in the crossfire. But when we get to this last issue, as they start to realize, like, the problem's been is that we're seeing each other as uh separate from each other when we're, we're we all inhabit this planet, so we all need to figure out how to make our lives work together, whether you're metahuman or you're a regular human. They need to be able to learn how to coexist with one another. And because it's always been interesting that, like, throughout for the first three issues, it's always been, the humans sitting, basically like just in dread the entire time, because it's like there's a war brewing between the, I guess you call it like the old guard of superhumans against the new guard of superhumans, and to see who's going to win, and we're just going to have to deal with the ramifications. But it's great when they realize that it's, as we get to it, it's like, no, it's not just that, it's not that simple. And then it even plays into the idea, it's like one of the things that happens in this issue is that it's placed before Norman's feet. It's like, you got to deem who's at fault, which is a little infuriating that he actually doesn't. It's like the Spectre tells Norman, it's like, all right, you're going to need to make, it's going to be your call who faces judgment. And then he winds up never even making the call. Captain Marvel winds up making the call, and saying that nobody should suffer, except he's willing to take on that burden. Um, so it's just, it's, when you're dealing with situations that, when people are not seeing eye to eye, and obviously most of us, we're not dealing with stuff at this scale. It's like, I know there are soldiers out there that are dealing with war, and there are a lot of countries that are at war in different ways. But for most of us, we're not at war. We're not off fighting, fighting in a war somewhere like at this scale. But there's some important lessons that we can learn when it comes to conflict that they exemplify great in this issue. And that, first off, like just like Patrick was saying, when Wonder Woman and Batman go fly up above the clouds away from the fight, they're actually able to see things a little bit clearer now, and then they can see where the actual problem is. There's 3 nuclear warheads coming their way. If they didn't take a step away from the fight that they were embroiled in, they would not have seen that coming. And with 3 of them dropping, I don't think they would have been able to stop them. But since they were able to remove themselves from the fight, take a step back, they could see what the actual problem was. And so that's a great point to learn when you're dealing with conflict. Sometimes you got to stop the fight, take a couple steps back, and really look at your surroundings and really look at the situation from a new perspective. So then you could actually really tackle the problem, at the real problem. Because a lot of times a conflict isn't just what is actually happening in the fight. There's been things that have been leading up to it that have caused this fight to happen. So that's another great point that in dealing with conflict. And then another thing too, when you're dealing with conflict, more than likely, it's not just one person at fault. There are times that there's 100% is one person is at fault in a conflict, and you can handle it that way. But a lot of times it's not. It's not as clean cut as one person is at fault. A lot of times there's in a conflict, multiple, both parties can be at fault, and so that's just. And again, it's not that they're being overly preachy about any of these things, but it's truth. And am I wrong, Patrick?
No, yeah, absolutely. There's so much, to deal with all of this. And when it comes to conflict, there's so many different ways to deal with it. Jesus actually gives us a pretty good plan on how to deal with conflict. I believe it's either Matthew 18 or Matthew 19. I can't remember which specific chapter off the top of my head. It's one of the two, I think. Yeah. And how to deal with conflict. And one of the most important things is Jesus emphasizes, going with grace and humility. And so that's always an important thing when dealing with conflict is what spirit are you in? And now sometimes you have to deal with the conflict when you're mad and you're all riled up because you've got to deal with the issue in the moment. But there are times when you'd be like, oh, you know what, this is really making me mad, and I've just got to pull myself out, just like Batman and Wonder Woman did, and she's like, okay, what's going on? But here's the other thing, though, is that they still communicated and they still talked through the issue, and they really did it a year later. Probably shouldn't wait that long most of the time, but we also got to take the time to really talk through conflict, and because if you don't, then it's just going to stew. And I'll say this is a weakness of mine of dealing with conflict. It is a huge weakness of mine. I'm not good at it. It's a very big growing edge for me. And so it might be for other people too, and so I hope people who listen to this will really take to heart the necessity of talking about issues and conflict and working through them. And so with the beginning of Revelation is used a lot in Kingdom Come, and one of the verses that was used was Revelation 14:7, he said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." This was said by the specter to Norman Mackay, letting him know that it is coming time for his judgment to be made. And so I really like that verse, and it's, fun to play with.
And so the verse that I just think really sticks out in this issue, outside of the obvious ties to Revelation, is, and this is probably the most well-known verse in the Bible across the globe. It's John 3:16. However, I want to add on, which this verse is just as important as verse 16, in my opinion, is verse 17, which follows verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. So one of the things that, when you get as much into comics as my brother and I are, one of the things you start to see that's happened with Superman over the decades is that Superman has become more and more of a Christ-like figure. Like, he gets held up as this Messiah, savior sort of thing. And in fact, when you actually go back to the origins of Superman, Superman was not intended to be a Christ-like figure. He was actually intended to be a Mosaic figure, similar to Moses. That Moses was sent from the Hebrews and was raised amongst the Egyptian royalty with Pharaoh. So was Kal-El was sent from Krypton to Earth to be raised among the humans on Earth, and provide help and shelter that way. But anyways, so it's really interesting that what Mark and Alex do with their story here is that instead of putting the Messiah figure on Superman, they actually put it on Captain Marvel. So in order to save to save people, the only person that understood what it truly meant, and Superman even gives Captain Marvel credit for this when they're meeting with the UN, is that Marvel was the only one that understood that it didn't have to be one or the other. It didn't have to be superhumans. It didn't have to be humans, and it didn't have to be, the old guard superhumans and the new guard superhumans. It was about life. And obviously, there was death at the fights. Like, there were still heroes that were killed. However, Captain Marvel sacrificed himself so that nobody else had to die, and that the world can be put back the way that it was supposed to be, that it was meant to be. And the fact that in this world, metahumans and humans should be working together to better the world as a whole, and not just be at war with one another. And one is not supposed to be superior over the other. Just because one has powers does not make them better than you. And Marvel, in these brief moments, understood that, so that's why he laid down his life so others could live for him, so that others could live.
Yeah, and it's always great to see how Captain Marvel was honored. Like, one of my favorite things that Superman does is he puts his cape on a pole to let him know, is like, Captain Marvel was the best of us in this moment, because he is the one who could bridge the gap. As Jeff said earlier about him being both man and Superman all at the same time, he's the only one who truly understood. And so you kind of wonder if, for example, if Luthor hadn't got a hold of Billy, if this whole thing could have been avoided, because Captain Marvel was the bridge between man and Superman. And so it's just one of those fascinating things, because we know as Christians that our lives could not exist without Christ. And so it's just one of those fascinating things to see the kind of those connections in that way.
Yeah.
One of my favorite questions uh, that is asked in this comic is, it says, whose sin is this, the humans or the superhumans? And Norman is trying to, he's like, Spectre just told him, is like, well, I'm going to punish somebody, so just tell me who to punish. And Norman's like, who, I don't know whose fault this is. I mean, is it the humans, is it the superhumans? And this goes into so much discussion on sin and responsibility, and it just really opens the floodgates for all of this. And so it's one of those things for us to really understand that, the nature of sin is that the sin is choice. We choose to make mistakes. We choose to choose ourselves over God. Our lives that we're supposed to be living are the ones that is the life that God wants us to live. And when we choose ourselves over that then we sin. And so in this, Norman makes the great call. It's no one's sin. The sin has been the disconnect from each other. And that's all. And, when we really look at the definition of sin, sin is separation from God. The humans have been separated from the superhumans for far too long, and they need to get back together. So just like in our own lives, we are in need to get back to God fully. We can't just give Sunday to God or Wednesday, because, what, back in the day, the two holy days of the week were Sunday and Wednesday. They aren't anymore, but that's a whole other story. But you can't just give him Sunday. You can't just give him Wednesday. Or you're like, if you've got a small group that you're part of, you can't just give him the small group time. You got to give God 24/7. And so that's so important, because when we give God our 24/7, then life is just so much better.
Yeah. And in that same way, it's like, I mean, that's exactly what Christ came to do. Is, there's so much that you could look at and analyze when it comes to Christ and how he acts, that it's like, not, it's just like, so that's why verse 17 in John 3:16 and verse 17 is so important, because we have to understand, it's like, because so often, and I know we've discussed this on other episodes, but God, living for God, living as a Christian isn't a list of don'ts. That's where we get so messed up, is that, oh, well, being a Christian is basically just a bunch of things that I'm not allowed to do anymore. No, God, that's not why God sent his son. And that's why verse 17 is so important. God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him, through his son. And so that's why it's so important for us to understand that when we mess up, when we miss the mark, and it's like, I actually love this descriptor of with sin, is that when it comes to sin, it's not, it's, sin isn't just necessarily defying God, saying, no, I'm going to do this anyways, even though you told me not to, which, yes, that is sin. But what sin is basically saying is, what you've given me, God, is not enough. And so it's like, so let's say, for instance, let's take the stealing, which is a very easy one to kind of talk about. It's like, if you steal something, you're stealing it because you want it, and because what you already have in your life is not fulfilling you. And so you steal something that doesn't belong to you, and you're basically telling God, what I have is not enough, so I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And so in that same way, when it's whatever sin you want to talk about, it's you're telling God that what I have in my life is not enough. You have not given me everything that I need. And so that's that same vein, that when it comes to what Captain Marvel did in this series, and at the end, by sacrificing himself, he sacrificed himself so that the world could be saved. There was no need to condemn one side or the other, because honestly, both sides are at fault. But he's saved the world by sacrificing himself, and allows the world to be able to heal and get back to on the path that it was supposed to be in this type of world with superpowered beings.
And so this kind of wraps up our discussion of the Kingdom Come miniseries. Great, great little miniseries. I hope that our love and our joy of this miniseries has come through in these past 4 episodes of the show, and so I know that I hope that you give this a try, or if you've already read it, read it again, and then better yet, pass it on to someone else who hasn't read it before, because it's simply amazing. And so, all right, Jeff, what will you rate this comic?
This one's back to a 6, 6 out of 5, because it's a culmination of the entire series is building towards has been this final issue. The action in it in the very beginning, it's nonstop and absolutely gorgeous. Like, oh my gosh, the artwork in this is just phenomenal. We cannot emphasize that enough with this series, is just how glorious this artwork is. Sometimes we as comic book fans, we don't deserve Alex Ross sometimes and his artwork. And this is, and I very much enjoy Alex's artwork, but this is probably the best work he's ever done, bar none, in my opinion. It doesn't get any better than this when it comes to Alex Ross. And the story is it's phenomenal. It's, everything gets wrapped up. The idea, that the superhumans and the metahumans and the regular humans need to get back to working in harmony. It leads to that, and oh my gosh, we could spend an entire episode just rating and talking about what's amazing about it. And it's just so great. I thoroughly enjoy
We have
it.
just done that, by the way.
That's true. That's true.
And I'll give this a 5 out of 5 as well. It does a perfect wrap up of the series, and one of those things, like especially with a comic, a specific issue that has an epilogue with it, it didn't feel like the fight was too short. Like, because even while like Superman and Captain Marvel are fighting and arguing, Alex Ross does a great job of covering the rest of the fight in it. Like you see, because here's one of the crazy things in this issue is that the Green Lantern is Alan Scott and not Hal Jordan or Guy Gardner or Kyle Rayner or even John Stewart. I mean, granted, the Green Lantern was a white guy in this, so it's obviously not going to be John Stewart, but not one of those three. Instead, it's Alan Scott through all this, and you can see that in the fight, Green Arrow has taken out Alan Scott because, as we shared, Alan Scott's weakness is wood. So even though the fact that Alan Scott is in fact one of the most powerful heroes on the planet, he can't beat Green Arrow. But it's just one of those funny things. Anyway, so like I said, I'll give this issue a 5 out of 5 too, because it's perfect. There's things that I would do artistically different, but I'm also not the artist that people are clamoring for. But
amen to that.
That's right. I can't draw stick figures well, so but anyway, this is just perfect. If they do an animated a DC animated universe movie of this, I will buy it in a heartbeat. Because
I just don't know how they're going to be able to replicate the artwork, though.
That's true. And I mean, I don't like the artwork, the art that's they're doing now, anyways. So
Yeah.
that's a whole other thing.
The one thing that I'd say with this is, and I know they there's sort of a quasi sequel to this a little bit in Jeff Johns' Justice Society run, but it's like there's something about the children of the heroes that I'm really intrigued about. Like, it's like I genuinely want to know about Superman and Wonder Woman's child together. And I do believe they've touched on it that they do wind up having a daughter. Am I correct in that?
Oh, that I am unsure. I know Mark Waid does uh, a sequel comic, but it's based more around Iris West. The flat, the uh, that's the one Mark Waid does, and I think he might have done a little bit more, but then they did like you said, Jeff Johns did his JSA story arc where they brought Kingdom Come Superman to Earth, and among other things they did with Kingdom Come. But I am not sure if the baby ever came around. I can't remember. It's been a really long time since I read that story arc. I mean, that was like 10 years ago, at least.
Yeah.
No, it's at least 11, because that story arc happened while I was still working at A Plus, and I stopped working there in 2010. So it was at least 11 years old, if not more.
Yeah. And it's like, and I just really love that. Like, I love the idea of, seeing these characters that, you really enjoy and love, and they grow up, but then they wind up getting married and having children and that sort of stuff. So, like, for instance, we've done a lot of My Hero Academia. And, for me, one of the things that I would love to see happen with the series is that when it wipes, kind of finishes the main story arc overall with the characters originally, like, I would love a sequel series with them as grown-ups, but also with them having children of their own as they go into My Hero Academia or onto the Hero Academia as well. And so it's like I love that sort of stuff, because it's like, I don't know, I just really dig that sort of stuff.
Yeah, same here, and I hope they do that as well. But who knows?
I mean, it's one of the things that I really like about Young Justice as well, is that they're, they've got, you're getting to see the quote unquote sidekicks grow up. And so I just really like that. I just really like that aspect. So I was just curious about that, because I was pretty certain that they had a daughter, that it was. And I don't know if there's probably miniseries out there somewhere, or one shots of stuff, and especially with as many reboots as DC's been going through these last few years. I wonder if they have something about Kingdom Come and one of the Convergence issues. Anyways, I'm sorry.
I don't think so. They might have, but I don't remember. All right, so let's announce what we're going to be doing in the next season of Frickety Frack We Do Talk Back. You want to tell them?
We are going back to My Hero Academia, and we will be doing the first story arc of season 2. And then from there, like just how we did with the first season of My Hero Academia, we went out to do something a little different. We're going to cover the first story arc of season 2 of My Hero Academia, and then we will make an announcement as to what exactly we'll be doing after that.
Yeah, so we'll split the season up, and we're gonna follow the Amazon Prime episode breakdown, and so when the season 2 ends with those episodes, we'll stop and go on to another thing. It could be any number of things that we'll do. We've got a few different ideas, so we'll have to cement what we're going to do. All right, so come back next week and we will start back up My Hero Academia. So, but anyone with questions for us about biblical lessons that we've talked about in this episode or other discussion, ranging anywhere from anime, comics, or anything in general, feel free to email us at fricketyfracktalkback@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter at FrickityF or FrickityFrack on Instagram and Facebook.
Just know that you are deeply loved by not only by God the Father, but by us as well. And we'll see you same bad time, same bad channel.